Software. We as audio engineers all use it. Pro Tools, Logic, Final Cut, plugins. But it's all so expensive, isn't it? Crass people don't notice too much because we get all this for free with tuition. But have we ever looked at the actual price of all of the tools we use every day? It adds up extremely quickly. And why? It's just a bunch of ones and zeros. Well, because development is hard and costs money, obviously. But what if I told you there's a better way? A way to replace the fab filters of the world with ZL equalizers. A way to replace UAD LA2As with vocal compressor. The black holes with endless, and Pro Tools with something. It's Reaper, but more on that later. Software isn't the only thing that can benefit from open source, usually free alternatives to industry standards. Audio codecs have a bit of an issue, especially AAC, which usually has the M4A container. Again, more on that later. I'm going to play 5 audio files. They're all a sample of an unreleased song of mine, but encoded to different formats: WAV, FLAC, OGG vorbis, M4A, and MP3. Traditional wisdom says the WAV should sound the best, MP3 should sound the worst, but I'm not going to tell you which is which, and you have to guess. Or you can just assign them a quality number, given that we know which codecs should sound better and worse than each other. So without further ado, the audio.
I say this, I'm dislocated. Why back this lie? Monster stained with blood and chocolate. I say this, I'm dislocated. Why back this lie?
Pause or go back if you don't have your ranking figured out. Now, this is an interesting experiment because as an audio engineer, I'm not going to say there is no difference, but I will say very confidently that the differences are absolutely nominal. The last time I did this test with a CD, I was able to correctly identify the MP3, and that was it. But the real kicker here are the file sizes. In order of the theoretical best-sounding file to the least, the WAV file is 4.4 megabytes, the FLAC is 2.7 megabytes, the M4A is 1 megabyte, the OGG is 456 kilobytes, and the MP3 is 997 kilobytes. Even an OGG file of maximum quality is only 937 megabytes, with a significantly higher bitrate than MP3 even supports. All in all, OGG vorbis as a codec is significantly smaller than other file types, with better compression and what I consider to be nominal losses. And this isn't even considering Opus, Vorbis's big brother by the same company that is also open source, which leads me to my point. Open source. What does that mean? Well, an open source release simply means that anyone can view the source code. That's it. It doesn't mean it is free software. It doesn't mean that it isn't under a restrictive license. It just means you can view the source code. That being said, open source projects generally are released under very relaxed licenses and are generally free. Since if you're able to view the source code, you could, in theory, build the software yourself, even if it, in theory, costs money. So, what are some open source things? The most prevalent is OGG Vorbis, Opus, and FLAC codecs, all released by the same nonprofit, by the way, as well as very recently the VST3 plugin format, Osseo drivers for Windows, the above-mentioned plugins, ZL Equalizer, Vocal Compressor, Neural Note, Pyrite Compressor, Endless Reverb, countless others, and no, not Reaper. Though I will include it as a very honorable mention because it functions very much like open source software, even though it technically is not. Now, why exactly am I talking about this? Because the audio industry wastes a lot of money on proprietary software when open source alternatives already exist. The easiest example is M4A. In order for a company to implement the M4A codec into any product, whether it be a DAW or a phone, a computer, an operating system, they have to pay royalties as well as agree to a licensing agreement with the people that made it, like Dolby, AT&T, Fraunhofer, and Sony. Finding who royalties go to and actual licenses is a bit difficult. This is in comparison to the OGG Vorbis, Opus, or FLAC format, which are all freely available to be implemented into software, hardware, you name it. It's open source. They couldn't restrict what people do with it if they wanted to, because the source code is available for everyone to look at. Now, why should you care if a format you're using is open source? Well, because you're paying for it. Part of the reason that Reaper licenses are so cheap is because render support for M4A is not included by default, because it's an expensive codec to license, or complicated, or something. Again, very little information. But given this is a DAW that includes support for 15 codecs out of the box, including CD images, LCF video, and CAF, there is a good reason an AAC encoder is not included. And speaking about Reaper, why hasn't the audio industry switched to Reaper? I know why, but hear me out. A Pro Tools Ultimate license costs $360 a year, and that's not even all, because it requires you to own their hardware to even function, and that might be a minimum of $5,000. A Reaper license is $60 for an individual, $225 for a proper commercial license, and free if you're willing to deal with a pop-up. Oh, but Pro Tools has more functionality, I hear you saying. No. Not only does Reaper have every function of Pro Tools out of the box, and a Pro Tools workflow can be recreated pretty directly inside of Reaper, but because it functions like open source software, the amount of customization for UI elements as well as core functionality is quite limitless. Just the most popular extension, SWSS&M, which is open source by the way, adds things to Reaper such as snapshots, marker actions, groove tools, cycle actions, loudness metering tools, tempo manipulation, warp grid, a keyboard command interface for common track tasks, live configuration, and a fair bit more. And if you have the desire, you can write your own actions and scripts inside Reaper. I use them. I like a particular solo configuration, so I wrote some scripts to get this solo configuration to work. This is impossible in Pro Tools. You work the way Pro Tools works. Reaper works how you want it to work. And that's why I include Reaper in a presentation that is supposed to be about open source software, because it complies with the ideal. You shouldn't have to adapt to the way tools work. Tools should work the way you want them to work. And you should be able to understand what you're running locally. Open source software accomplishes this goal, and I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but it helps with ownership. It is not possible to own Pro Tools. It will either connect to Avid servers to confirm you own it, or you have to purchase a physical device to prove you own it. Their hardware contacts their servers as well, which means at any point, it can be disabled. I'm not saying it will, but why take that risk? Why are we okay with that? And it is a risk. A company called Future Home sold people a smart thermostat. All good. Except then they went bankrupt, reformed, and began charging over $100 per year in order for the product these people already purchased to continue working. These systems were installed in around 38,000 homes when this occurred. And there's almost 1,000 stories documented exactly like this on consumerrights.wiki of ownership being taken away just for a few more dollars. We can't change that. But you know what? I refuse to believe that there's nothing we can do. The audio world is littered with ownership problems like this. While I was at the conservatory, I was contacted by a plugin manufacturer stating I would lose access to the paid plugins that I owned of theirs if I didn't migrate my account to a Plugin Alliance account. It's far from the most egregious example, but it was a sign that right then and there, Swivel Audio is no longer a company I have any interest in supporting. There is an open source, free, or otherwise non-predatory alternative to everything we use in this industry. The tools to clean up our corner of the world in professional audio exist, and it's my opinion that it's high time we started using them.